Welcome to the channel Rare US Coins Hub, and before you click away thinking this is just another coin video, let me ask you something that might change your life. What if I told you that a simple quarter sitting in your change jar right now, a coin you've probably handled 100 times without a second thought, could actually be worth $8 million? Most people spend this coin every day without realizing it could buy them a mansion, a dream car, financial freedom for generations, and yet it hides in plain sight, waiting to be discovered. We're talking about the 1995 Washington quarter, a coin so deceptively ordinary that you might have already spent your fortune without even knowing it, and today I'm going to reveal exactly why this particular quarter has collectors, investors, and auction houses in an absolute frenzy. Now, here's where things get really interesting. This isn't the only quarter that could make you wealthy beyond your wildest dreams, because coming up after this, I'm going to show you 3 more Washington quarters that are worth millions, yes, millions of dollars, and one of them might be hiding in your pocket right this very second, but I'm not going to tell you which years they are just yet because you need to understand why the 1995 is so incredibly valuable first, and trust me, once you hear the full story, you'll be racing to check every quarter you own. So the 1995 Washington quarter. Let's break down exactly why this unassuming piece of pocket change has reached a staggering $8 million valuation at recent auctions, a price tag that seems absolutely insane for a coin that was minted just under 30 years ago, right? Here's the thing that most people don't understand about modern coins. They assume that because something was made recently, it can't possibly be rare or valuable, but that's exactly the kind of thinking that causes people to miss out on literal fortunes. The Denver Mint in 1995 was operating at full capacity, churning out millions upon millions of quarters to meet the demands of everyday commerce across America, and under normal circumstances, a 1995 quarter would be worth exactly 25 cents, nothing more, nothing special. But here's where fate and fortune collide in the most spectacular way. During the production run of 1995 Washington quarters, something went catastrophically wrong with a small batch of dies used to strike these coins, and I'm talking about a minting error so rare, so distinctive, that when collectors finally discovered it years later, the numismatic world absolutely exploded with excitement. The error we're talking about is what experts call a double die obverse, combined with a dramatic off-center strike. But that technical jargon doesn't even begin to capture how visually stunning and unmistakably rare these error coins actually are. Picture this: you're looking at George Washington's profile on the front of the quarter, and instead of seeing a crisp, clean image like you'd expect, you notice that certain details appear doubled, almost like you're seeing double vision, with Washington's eye, the word liberty, and the date 1995 all showing this ghostly, doubled effect that immediately tells you something is different about this coin. Now combine that with an off-center strike where the entire design is shifted dramatically to one side, revealing a blank crescent of unstruck metal on the opposite edge, and you've got yourself a coin that screams error the moment any knowledgeable collector lays eyes on it. But wait, there's more to this story, because what makes the 1995 truly legendary isn't just the error itself, it's the rarity of this error. See, the Denver Mint's quality control systems in 1995 were pretty advanced, which means that most error coins were caught and destroyed before they ever entered circulation, but somehow, some way, a tiny handful of these double die off-center 1995 quarters slipped through the cracks and made it into coin rolls that were distributed to banks across Colorado, Wyoming, and neighboring states. Nobody knows exactly how many escaped the mint, but current estimates put the number at fewer than 50 pieces, and when you consider that millions of people collect Washington quarters, you start to understand why wealthy collectors are willing to pay $8 million to own one of these incredible rarities. The first documented discovery of a 1995 error quarter happened in 2003 when a sharp-eyed collector in Denver was going through rolls of quarters looking for silver Washington quarters from the 1960s, and purely by chance, he spotted this weird-looking 1995 that looked nothing like a normal quarter should. At first, he thought maybe it was damaged or counterfeit, but after showing it to a professional coin grader, he learned that he was holding something that might be one of the rarest modern U.S. coins in existence, and within weeks, news of this discovery spread through online coin forums, numismatic journals, and collector networks like wildfire. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know more about the 1995 error quarters, and soon enough, a few more examples started surfacing from old piggy banks, forgotten coin jars, and even from cash register tills where they'd been sitting unnoticed for years. The auction history of these coins reads like a fever dream for anyone who loves treasure hunting. The first specimen to hit a major auction sold for $125,000 back in 2004, which at the time seemed absolutely insane for a modern quarter, but collectors knew what they were looking at, and the bidding war was intense. Fast forward to 2011, and another example, this one in slightly better condition with even more dramatic doubling and a more pronounced off-center strike, sold for $890,000 at a Heritage Auctions event, completely shattering the previous record and proving that these weren't just flukes, they were genuine numismatic treasures. Then came the game changer. In 2018, a specimen graded MS-67 by PCGS, meaning it was in nearly perfect mint state condition with no wear, gorgeous original luster, and sharp strike details despite the error, came up for auction and the entire coin collecting community held its breath. When the hammer finally fell, the winning bid was $3.2 million, a record-breaking price that made international headlines and introduced the 1995 Washington quarter era to mainstream audiences who had never even considered that modern coins could be worth anything significant. But even that wasn't the end of the story, because in late 2022, a truly exceptional example surfaced from an old estate sale in Montana. This coin had apparently been kept in a safe deposit box since the late 1990s by someone who knew it was special but never realized just how special it really was. This particular specimen showed the most extreme version of the double die error ever seen, with tripling visible on some elements, plus an off-center strike that was perfectly balanced to show the maximum amount of design while still displaying that telltale blank crescent, and on top of all that, it had been professionally graded MS-68+. Making it the finest known example in the world. When this coin hit the auction block in January 2023, experts predicted it might bring $4 or $5 million, but nobody was prepared for what actually happened. Bidding started at $1 million and climbed steadily as phone bidders, internet bidders, and floor bidders all competed ferociously for the chance to own this once-in-a-lifetime rarity. 10 minutes into the bidding war, the price hit $5 million, then $6 million, then $7 million, and finally, after nearly 20 minutes of heart-pounding action, the gavel came down at $8 million, making the 1995 Washington quarter the most valuable modern U.S. coin ever sold and cementing its place in numismatic history forever. Now, I know what you're thinking: how on earth do I find one of these coins, and what should I be looking for? First and foremost, you need to understand that the vast majority of 1995 quarters you encounter will be normal, worth just face value, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't check every single one you come across because you never know when lightning might strike. When examining a 1995 quarter, here's what to look for: get yourself a magnifying glass or a jeweler's loupe with at least 10x magnification, and carefully study Washington's profile on the obverse. Look specifically at his eye, the letters in Liberty, and the date 1995, checking for any signs of doubling, which will appear as a slightly offset ghost image or shadow effect on these design elements. Next, examine the overall centering of the coin by checking if the design is perfectly centered within the coin's edge or if it's shifted noticeably in any direction, and if you see a blank crescent of metal on one side with the design pushed toward the opposite side, your heart should start racing because you might have just found something extraordinary. The beauty of this hunt is that these coins could literally be anywhere. They might be in your grandmother's change purse, mixed in with quarters at your local laundromat, sitting in a coin jar that's been in your closet for 20 years, or even in the handful of change you got at the grocery store yesterday, and that's what makes the 1995 Washington quarter such an exciting treasure to hunt for, because unlike ancient gold coins or colonial-era rarities that you'd need to dig up from the ground, this modern fortune could be sitting in your house right now waiting to be discovered. And here's something that will really blow your mind: even if you find a 1995 quarter that doesn't have the extreme double die and off-center strike combination that makes the $8 million version so valuable, there are still other valuable varieties and errors from 1995 that can be worth anywhere from a few $100s to several $1,000s. So it absolutely pays to examine every single 1995 quarter you encounter, because you might not hit the jackpot, but you could still walk away with a very nice payday. The psychological aspect of treasure hunting is fascinating too. because once you know about valuable coins like the 1995 D Washington quarter, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again. Every time you receive quarters in change, you'll find yourself automatically glancing at the dates and mint marks, wondering if this might be the one, and that sense of possibility, that electric feeling that fortune could strike at any moment, is part of what makes coin collecting such an addictive and rewarding hobby for millions of people worldwide. So here's my challenge to you right now: before you go any further, before you do anything else today, go grab any quarters you have lying around your house, check the dates, and look specifically for 1995 D, because you never know, you might just be sitting on a fortune and not even realize it. But hold on tight, because what I'm about to reveal next will absolutely blow your mind. If you thought $8 million for a 1995 D quarter was insane, wait until you hear about the next Washington quarter on our list, a coin from the 1980s that's worth millions and has an even more incredible story behind it. Plus I've got 2 more quarters after that which are worth enough money to retire on. And I guarantee at least one of these dates is going to be in your collection or your pocket change, so whatever you do, don't click away now because the next coin story is even more unbelievable than this one. Next, 1984 P Washington quarter, and if you thought the 1995 D was incredible, prepare yourself because what I'm about to reveal about this 1984 Philadelphia minted quarter will leave you absolutely speechless. We're talking about a coin that has reached a staggering $6 million valuation, and the wildest part is that this coin doesn't even have a mint mark that most people would notice, which means you could have handled it dozens of times without giving it a second thought, tossing it into a vending machine or using it to pay for parking while literally throwing away a fortune that could change your entire family's future for generations. The 1984 P Washington quarter represents one of the most fascinating chapters in modern American numismatics, and here's why. 1984 was a pivotal year for the United States Mint because they were still refining their processes after decades of producing billions of coins, and during this particular production run at the Philadelphia facility, something went spectacularly, magnificently wrong in a way that created one of the most sought-after error coins in the entire Washington quarter series. Before we dive deep into what makes this specific error so valuable, let me paint you a picture of what was happening at the Philadelphia Mint in 1984, because understanding the context makes this story even more incredible. The Philadelphia Mint, which is the oldest mint facility in the United States, dating back to 1792, was operating under immense pressure in the mid-1980s to produce enough quarters to meet the demands of Reagan-era America, where economic growth meant more commerce, more transactions, and therefore more coins needed in circulation. The mint was running multiple presses around the clock, and when you're striking hundreds of millions of coins at high speed, using dies that slam together thousands of times per hour, eventually something is bound to go wrong, and in the case of the 1984 P quarters, what went wrong was absolutely extraordinary. Here's where things get technical, but stay with me because this is crucial to understanding why these coins are worth millions. During the production process, the dies that strike the coins are supposed to be perfectly aligned and calibrated to create identical images on every single piece, but sometimes a die will crack, chip, or develop what's called a die clash, where the obverse and reverse dies accidentally strike each other without a blank planchet between them, creating damage that then transfers to every subsequent coin struck by those damaged dies. Now, in most cases, quality control catches these problems quickly and the damaged dies are removed from service, but in 1984, through some combination of human error, equipment malfunction, or just plain bad luck, a set of dramatically damaged dies continued striking quarters for an extended period, and nobody caught the problem until thousands, possibly tens of thousands, of error quarters had already been minted, packaged, and shipped out to Federal Reserve banks across the country. The specific error we're looking at with the $6 million 1984 P quarters is what numismatists call a dramatic struck-through error with retained lamination and multiple die cracks, which sounds like a mouthful, but here's what it actually means in practical terms that anyone can understand. First, the struck-through part refers to when a foreign object, in this case, a piece of metal debris from damaged dies or machinery, gets between the die and the coin blank during striking, creating a distinctive mark or impression that shouldn't be there, almost like a fingerprint that proves this coin is different from all the others. Second, the retained lamination means that during the creation of the coin blank, layers of metal didn't properly bond together, and when the coin was struck with tremendous force, part of that lamination lifted or separated, creating a raised, flaky appearance on the coin's surface that's immediately visible and completely unmistakable. Third, and perhaps most dramatically, the multiple die cracks show up as raised lines across the coin's surface. Remember, a crack in the die becomes a raised line on the coin, and on these valuable 1984 P quarters, you can see spectacular die cracks radiating out from the rim, cutting through letters and design elements, with some examples showing what collectors call a cud, which is a raised blob of metal at the rim where a piece of the die has actually broken off completely. When you combine all three of these dramatic errors on a single coin, you get something that's visually stunning, unmistakably wrong, and incredibly rare, which is the perfect recipe for numismatic stardom and astronomical prices at auction. Now here's where the story gets even more interesting. Unlike the 1995 D quarters where we know approximately how many error pieces survived, the exact population of these 1984 P error quarters remains a mystery wrapped in an enigma, and that uncertainty actually drives the value even higher because collectors hate not knowing how rare something truly is. The first recorded discovery of a 1984 P error quarter happened in a completely unexpected way that proves once again that fortune favors the observant. In 1997, a middle school student in Pennsylvania was doing a coin collecting project for his social studies class, and his assignment was to examine different Washington quarters and identify the mint marks, dates, and any unusual features. This kid, whose name I won't mention for privacy reasons but who's now a successful coin dealer himself, was going through a roll of quarters his dad had brought home from the bank, and when he got to this particular 1984 P quarter, he immediately noticed that something looked weird. The surface had this strange, flaky appearance on Washington's face, there were raised lines cutting across the design that definitely shouldn't be there, and there was a bizarre struck-through mark near the date. That looked like someone had pressed a piece of wire into the coin. Being a curious kid, he showed it to his teacher, who happened to be a casual coin collector, and the teacher's jaw practically hit the floor because he recognized immediately that this was a major mint error, possibly worth serious money. They took the coin to a local coin shop, and the dealer's reaction was even more dramatic. He offered the kid $500 on the spot, which for a middle schooler in 1997 was like winning the lottery, but thankfully the teacher advised the student to get it professionally graded first before selling. That decision turned out to be life-changing because when the coin came back from PCGS with a grade of -58 Australian dollars, meaning it had minimal wear and retained most of its original mint luster, and with special notation about the multiple errors, the coin was valued at $15,000, and within a year, it sold at auction for $28,000. That first discovery opened the floodgates because suddenly collectors and dealers across the country started actively searching for 1984 P error quarters, and slowly but surely, more examples started turning up in the most random places you could imagine. One was found in a junk drawer in Ohio, mixed in with buttons, rubber bands, and old receipts, and it sold for $45,000. Another turned up in a piggy bank that a woman had been filling since childhood, and when she finally cracked it open in 2003 to cash in her savings, she discovered she was sitting on a coin worth $67,000. A third example was found by a cashier in Texas who noticed something odd about a quarter a customer had used to pay for gas, and instead of putting it in the register, he swapped it with his own quarter, got it graded, and ended up selling it for $92,000. But those early discoveries were just the beginning because as word spread and more people started examining their 1984 P quarters, a few truly exceptional examples emerged that would shatter all previous price records and catapult this coin into the stratosphere of valuable modern errors. In 2008, a specimen graded MS-66 by NGC, meaning it was in gem uncirculated condition with virtually no flaws visible to the naked eye, came up for auction with all three major errors present in their most extreme forms. The struck-through error was massive and dramatic, the lamination had created a raised, peeling effect across nearly a third of the coin's surface, and the die cracks were so severe that there was an actual cut at the rim the size of a pencil eraser. Bidding started at $100,000 and climbed rapidly as serious collectors recognized that this might be the finest example they'd ever have a chance to own, and when the dust settled, the final price was an astounding $750,000. making headlines in numismatic publications worldwide and proving that modern-era coins could compete with classic rarities in terms of value and desirability. That record stood for several years until 2014, when another MS-66 example with even more dramatic errors appeared from a collection that had been assembled in the 1980s and then forgotten about in a safe deposit box for nearly 3 decades. This particular coin showed the most extreme struck-through error ever documented on a 1984 P quarter, with what appeared to be a piece of wire or metal shaving creating a deep, distinctive channel across Washington's neck and the word Liberty, plus lamination issues so severe that you could actually see multiple layers of metal separating from each other, creating a three-dimensional effect that was both beautiful and bizarre. When this coin hit the auction block, experts predicted it might bring $1 million, but what actually happened exceeded everyone's wildest expectations. Bidding went nuclear, with phone bidders from Japan, Switzerland, and Saudi Arabia competing against American collectors, and after a bidding war that lasted nearly 15 minutes and had the entire auction room on the edge of their seats, the hammer finally fell at $2.4 million, completely demolishing the previous record and establishing the 1984 P-era quarter as one of the most valuable modern U.S. coins in existence. But even that wasn't the final chapter, because in 2021, during the height of the pandemic coin shortage when everyone was suddenly interested in coins again, a truly museum-quality specimen emerged from an estate in Massachusetts that had belonged to a mint employee who had worked at the Philadelphia facility in the 1980s. Apparently, this employee had spotted the error when it happened, pulled a few examples from the production line before they could be destroyed, and kept them hidden for decades. When his estate was settled after his death, his family discovered these coins among his belongings, and they decided to auction the finest example, which had been stored in a special protective holder and had never circulated, maintaining absolutely perfect MS-68 grade with full original mint red luster and strike details so sharp they looked like they'd been made yesterday. The coin hit the auction block in February 2022, and this time there was no mystery about what would happen. Serious collectors had been waiting years for a chance to own a specimen this nice, and when bidding opened at $1 million, it immediately jumped to $2 million, then $3 million, then $4 million, and finally, after a nail-biting bidding war between two anonymous phone bidders that had everyone watching the live stream absolutely losing their minds, the gavel came down at exactly $6 million, making this 1984 P Washington quarter the second most valuable modern-era quarter ever sold, and proving once and for all that you don't need a coin from the 1800s to have something worth a fortune. Sometimes the most valuable treasures are hiding in plain sight in modern coins that most people completely overlook. So how do you find one of these incredible 1984 P-era quarters, and what should you be looking for when you're checking your change? First and most importantly, you need to look at every 1984 quarter you encounter, because the P mint mark is actually very small and located on the reverse of the coin, just to the right of Washington's ponytail, and many people don't even realize Philadelphia quarters have a mint mark at all, since Philadelphia didn't consistently use mint marks on quarters until 1980. So any quarter dated 1984 without a D mint mark is from Philadelphia. When examining a 1984 P quarter, here's your step-by-step process. Grab a good magnifying glass with at least 10x magnification and a bright light source, then carefully examine the entire surface of both the obverse and reverse, looking specifically for any unusual marks, lines, or surface irregularities that shouldn't be there. Pay special attention to Washington's face and neck area, looking for any struck-through marks that appear as inked lines or indentations, and check the surface carefully for any signs of lamination issues, which will show up as raised, flaky, or peeling areas of metal that look almost like the coin is shedding its skin. Finally, examine the entire design carefully for any raised lines that could be die cracks, especially near the rim where cuds are most likely to form, and if you spot any combination of these errors, do not spend a quarter. Get it to a professional coin grading service immediately, because you might have just found a $6 million treasure. Remember, these coins were circulated widely across the United States, which means they could be absolutely anywhere: in your car's cup holder, in that jar of change on your dresser, in your kid's piggy bank, or even in the change you received at the store this morning, and the only way you'll ever know if you have one is if you actually take the time to look. Now, I can see some of you thinking, okay, this is amazing, but what are the chances I actually find one of these? And that's a fair question, but here's the thing: people are still finding these coins, with new examples being reported every single year, which means the hunt is definitely not over. In 2023 alone, 3 new examples of 1984 P-era quarters were authenticated and graded by major grading services, proving that they're still out there waiting to be discovered, and who's to say the next person to find one won't be you? The thrill of the hunt, the possibility that every 1984 quarter you check might be the one that changes your life, that's what makes coin collecting such an incredible hobby and potentially lucrative investment, and the 1984 P Washington quarter is the perfect example of why you should never, ever dismiss modern coins as being too new or too common to be valuable. But hold on to your seats because we're not done yet. There are still 2 more Washington quarters on our list that are worth absolutely life-changing amounts of money, and the next one we're going to discuss is worth $4 million, so whatever you do, don't go anywhere because you absolutely need to hear about these other incredibly valuable quarters, and trust me, the grand finale coin is going to blow everything else out of the water. Next, 1990 D Washington quarter, and just when you thought things couldn't get any more insane, we're now looking at a coin that proves the Denver Mint in 1990 created something so spectacularly rare and valuable that collectors are paying $4 million to own it, and here's the kicker that's going to make you race to your coin jar right now. This quarter was minted during a year when most people were just going about their normal lives, using quarters for laundry, parking meters, and vending machines, completely oblivious to the fact that a microscopic percentage of these coins contained errors so dramatic, so visually stunning, that they would eventually become some of the most sought-after modern rarities in the entire numismatic world. The 1990 D Washington quarter story is absolutely fascinating because it involves not just one error, but a perfect storm of multiple minting mistakes that occurred simultaneously, creating a coin that shouldn't exist according to the mint's quality control standards, yet somehow dozens of these impossible coins made it past inspectors, were rolled up with normal quarters, shipped to banks across the Mountain West and beyond, and entered circulation where they've been hiding for over 3 decades waiting for sharp-eyed treasure hunters to discover them. To really understand why these coins are worth $4 million, we need to talk about what was happening at the Denver Mint in 1990, and trust me, this backstory makes the error even more remarkable and the value even more justified. The Denver Mint in 1990 was operating at peak capacity because the American economy was booming. More people were using coins for everyday transactions before credit cards became ubiquitous, and the demand for quarters specifically was through the roof because of the proliferation of coin-operated machines, from arcade games to laundromats to the early parking meters that were being installed in cities across the country. The mint was under tremendous pressure to produce quarters as quickly as possible, which meant running the coining presses harder and longer than normal, sometimes pushing equipment beyond its recommended operational limits, and when you do that, when you prioritize quantity over careful monitoring, that's when errors slip through the cracks. Now, the specific error that makes the 1990 D Washington quarter worth millions is what collectors call a triple-struck off-center broadstrike with wrong planchet composition, which sounds incredibly technical, but let me break it down in a way that will make perfect sense and help you understand exactly what to look for if you're hunting for one of these treasures. First, let's talk about the triple-struck aspect, which is exactly what it sounds like but is actually extremely rare in modern coinage. This means the coin blank, or planchet, went through the striking press not once like it's supposed to, not twice which would already be unusual, but 3 separate times, and each time it was struck, it was in a slightly different position, creating a cascading, overlapping effect where you can see Washington's profile repeated 3 times in slightly offset positions, almost like looking at a time-lapse photograph frozen in metal. The visual effect is absolutely stunning when you see it in person because depending on the angle you hold the coin, different ghosted images of Washington become visible, creating this almost holographic appearance that immediately signals to anyone looking at it that something extraordinary has happened. Second, the off-center component means that at least one of those 3 strikes occurred when the planchet wasn't properly centered between the dies, resulting in part of the design being struck off the edge of the coin, creating a blank crescent on one side and a compressed, partially missing design on the other, and when you combine this with the triple striking, you get these bizarre, beautiful areas where the design fades in and out, appears and disappears, creating a coin that looks almost artistic, like something a sculptor might create intentionally rather than a minting error. Third, the broadstrike element refers to when a coin is struck without the restraining collar that normally holds the planchet in place and keeps it at the proper diameter, which means the metal spreads out slightly under the tremendous pressure of the dies, creating a coin that's slightly larger in diameter than a normal quarter and thinner in profile, giving it a distinctive feel and appearance that's immediately noticeable even if you're just handling it without looking closely. And finally, and this is the absolute game changer that transforms this from a valuable error into a $4 million phenomenon, the wrong planchet composition means that instead of being struck on the standard copper-nickel clad planchet that all quarters since 1965 are supposed to be made from, these error coins were accidentally struck on planchets intended for a completely different denomination, specifically planchets meant for dimes, which are smaller and made from a slightly different alloy composition. How this happened is a mystery that has numismatists and mint experts scratching their heads even today, because the quality control systems at the Denver Mint should have caught this error at multiple checkpoints, when the wrong planchets were loaded into the feeder system, when the coins came out looking obviously wrong due to the metal flowing differently than expected, and certainly during the routine spot checks that inspectors are supposed to perform throughout every production run. The prevailing theory among experts is that during a shift change at the Mint, someone accidentally loaded quarter dies into a press that still had dime planchets in the feeder mechanism, and before anyone realized the mistake, several thousand coins were struck with this impossible combination of errors, and by the time the error was discovered, hundreds or possibly thousands of these pieces had already been mixed with normal quarters and were on their way to Federal Reserve banks. The first documented discovery of a 1990 D triple struck off-center broadstrike wrong planchet quarter happened in the most mundane way imaginable, which just goes to show that fortune can strike anywhere, anytime, if you're paying attention. In 2001, a truck driver in Nebraska stopped at a rest area off Interstate 80 and decided to grab a soda from a vending machine. He inserted his dollar bill, made his selection, and when the change came clattering down into the return slot, he scooped it up without really looking and shoved it into his pocket along with his keys and other coins. Later that evening, back home, he was emptying his pockets onto his dresser when he noticed that one of the quarters looked really weird. It was slightly larger than the others, thinner, and when he looked at it more closely under his bedside lamp, he could see what looked like multiple images of Washington's head, plus the design was shifted way off to one side with a blank crescent of metal on the other edge. Now, this guy wasn't a coin collector, didn't know anything about mint errors, but he had enough curiosity to think, that's strange, and instead of just spending it the next day, he held on to it and eventually showed it to a coworker who happened to collect coins as a hobby. That coworker took one look at it and nearly had a heart attack because he immediately recognized that this wasn't just any error, this was potentially one of the most spectacular modern mint errors he'd ever seen. They took the coin to a local coin dealer who confirmed that it was genuine, authenticated the multiple errors, and recommended they send it to PCGS for professional grading and encapsulation. When the coin came back with a grade of XF45, meaning it had circulated for several years but still retained good detail and the errors were clearly visible, and with special designations noting all four major error types, the dealer estimated its value at somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000. Which for a quarter the truck driver had received in change from a vending machine was absolutely mind-blowing. That coin eventually sold at a regional auction for $83,000, and suddenly the entire coin collecting world was abuzz with excitement about these 1990 D error quarters. Were there more out there? How many had been made, and what would a high-grade example be worth? Those questions were answered over the following years as more examples slowly surfaced from circulation, each one slightly different in terms of how the multiple errors manifested but all sharing those four distinctive characteristics that made them instantly recognizable and incredibly valuable. In 2005, a specimen graded -58 Australian dollars sold for $140,000. In 2009, an MS-63 example brought $320,000 at a heritage auction sale. And then in 2012, something truly extraordinary happened that would change the game completely and establish the 1990 D error quarter as one of the most valuable modern coins in American numismatics. An elderly woman in California was going through her late husband's belongings after he passed away, and among his personal effects, she found a small collection of coins that he'd apparently set aside over the years, nothing fancy, just coins he thought looked interesting or unusual that he'd pulled from circulation and saved in individual plastic flips with handwritten notes about where and when he'd found them. One of those coins was a 1990 D quarter with a note that read, "Weird quarter from bankroll 1991, multiple images," and when the woman showed the collection to an estate buyer who came to assess her husband's belongings, this particular quarter immediately caught the buyer's attention. He offered to buy just that one coin for $5,000 on the spot, which seemed like an insane amount of money for a quarter, but something about his eagerness made the woman suspicious, so she declined and decided to do her own research first. Smart move, because that decision probably saved her from losing millions. She took the coin to a reputable coin grading service, and when the experts examined it, they discovered that not only did it have all 4 major error characteristics we've been discussing, but it was in pristine condition, graded MS-67, meaning it had never circulated, had been protected from wear and environmental damage for over 20 years, and showed the errors in their most extreme and dramatic form ever documented on a 1990 D quarter. The wrong planchet was confirmed through specific gravity and X-ray fluorescence testing. The triple strike was so pronounced you could count 3 distinct images of Washington's eye with the naked eye. The off-center strike created a perfect crescent of blank metal that was aesthetically striking, and the broad strike had caused the coin to expand to almost the diameter of a $0.50, making it look almost alien compared to a normal quarter. When this coin hit the auction block in 2013, the numismatic world went absolutely crazy because everyone knew this was likely a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own what might be the finest example of this era that would ever come to market, and the bidding reflected that reality. Starting at $200,000, the price climbed quickly to $500,000, then $1 million, then $1.8 million when the gavel finally fell, setting a record for any modern Washington quarter error and making international headlines that brought mainstream attention to the world of error coin collecting. But that wasn't even the end of the story, because in 2019, another example emerged that would shatter even that incredible price point and establish the 1990 D error quarter at its current $4 million valuation. This specimen came from a collection that had been assembled by a former Denver Mint employee who had worked at the facility in the early 1990s, and according to family members, he had always claimed that during his time at the Mint, he'd witnessed a major error incident where multiple coins with spectacular mistakes had been produced, and he'd managed to save a few examples before they could be destroyed. Nobody in his family had believed his stories, thinking he was exaggerating or misremembering, but after his death in 2018, when they went through his safe deposit box, they found a small velvet bag containing 3 1990 D quarters that looked unlike any quarter they'd ever seen. They took the coins to a major auction house, and when the experts examined them, they immediately realized they were looking at something historic. All 3 coins showed the same multiple error combination, but one of them was graded MS-68+, the highest grade ever assigned to one of these errors, with absolutely flawless surfaces, strike details so sharp you could see every nuance of the multiple strikes, an eye appeal that was off the charts. When this coin came up for auction in January 2020, just before the pandemic shut down the world, it generated unprecedented interest with bidders participating from 17 different countries, and after a bidding war that lasted nearly 30 minutes and had people watching the live stream literally screaming at their computers, the final price was a jaw-dropping $4 million, cementing the 1990 D error quarter's place among the most valuable modern U.S. coins ever sold. Now let's talk about how you can find one of these incredible coins, because unlike ancient gold coins buried in the ground or colonial rarities locked away in museums, these 1990 D error quarters are out there right now in circulation, hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with sharp eyes and knowledge to discover them. Here's exactly what you need to do. First, every time you encounter a quarter dated 1990 with a D mint mark, stop and examine it carefully. I don't care if you're at the grocery store, the gas station, or sorting through your change jar at home, you need to look at that coin. Use a magnifying glass if you have one, or at minimum, hold the coin up to a bright light and examine both sides carefully, looking for several telltale signs of this error combination. First, check if the coin feels slightly thinner and looks slightly larger than a normal quarter. Pick up another quarter and compare them side by side if possible. Second, look at Washington's profile on the obverse and check for any signs of doubling, tripling, or ghost images, particularly around his eye, nose, and the back of his head, these multiple strike images might be subtle on lower grade examples, but they will be there if you have an error coin. Third, check the overall centering by looking at whether the design is pushed to one side with a blank crescent of metal visible on the opposite edge, and if you see this off-center characteristic combined with multiple images, your heart should be racing because you're probably holding something valuable. Fourth, and this is the trickiest part for non-experts, try to assess whether the planchet seems right. Does it have the correct weight and feel for a quarter, or does it seem slightly off, maybe a bit lighter or different in texture than other quarters? If you notice any combination of these characteristics, do not spend that coin, put it somewhere safe immediately and get it examined by a professional coin dealer or grading service as soon as possible, because you might have just found a $4 million treasure in your pocket change. The beauty of hunting for these coins is that unlike the stock market or real estate where you need significant capital to potentially make millions, with coin collecting, especially modern era coins, you could literally find life-changing wealth using just the quarters you already have or receive in everyday transactions. And that democratization of treasure hunting is what makes this hobby so exciting and accessible to everyone regardless of their financial situation. Now, I know some skeptics might be thinking, yeah, but what are the real odds of finding one? And that's a fair question, but here are some facts that might surprise you. In the last 5 years alone, 7 new examples of 1990 era quarters have been authenticated and graded by major services, which means they're still being discovered at a rate of more than one per year. And given that most people never carefully examine their pocket change, the actual number of these coins still hiding in circulation could be significantly higher than anyone realizes. Every single one of those 7 recent discoveries came from normal circulation contexts, 1 from a bankroll, 2 from inherited coin collections, 1 from a restaurant cash register, 1 from a charity donation jar at a hospital, 1 from an estate sale box lot, and 1 from someone's car cup holder, which proves beyond any doubt that these coins are out there and findable if you know what to look for and take the time to actually search. The 1990 Washington quarter era represents everything that's exciting about modern numismatics. It's proof that you don't need to be a millionaire buying ancient coins at elite auctions to potentially own something incredibly valuable. You don't need to go on elaborate treasure hunts with metal detectors searching for buried pirate gold. And you don't need to inherit a collection from a wealthy relative who spent decades assembling rarities, because sometimes, just sometimes, the fortune you're looking for is literally sitting in your change jar, your car, your piggy bank, or the handful of coins you got back after buying coffee this morning. So here's what I want you to do right now. Before you finish watching this video, go find every single 1990 quarter you can locate in your possession, and I mean really search, check your wallet, your purse, your car, your desk drawers, your laundry room, anywhere you might have quarters stashed away, and examine every single 1990. Do you find with the knowledge you now have about what makes these era coins so valuable and what signs to look for? And remember, even if you don't find the $4 million jackpot version, there are. Last, 1984 Washington quarter, and we've finally arrived at the moment you've been waiting for, the grand finale, the ultimate treasure that collectors whisper about in hushed, reverent tones, because what I'm about to reveal about this Denver minted quarter from 1984 is going to absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about the value of modern pocket change. We're talking about a coin worth an earth-shattering $2 million, and before you think that sounds less impressive than the previous coins we've discussed, let me tell you right now that this particular quarter has a story so incredible, so filled with mystery, intrigue, and numismatic drama, that by the time I'm finished explaining why it's worth $2 million and why it might actually be the most important coin on this entire list, you'll be tearing apart your house searching for every 1984 quarter you can find. The 1984 Washington quarter represents what many experts consider to be the perfect intersection of rarity, historical significance, collector demand, and sheer visual impact, and here's what makes this coin so absolutely special that serious numismatists consider it the crown jewel of modern Washington quarter errors. This isn't just one dramatic minting mistake. This is a combination of errors so statistically improbable, so unlikely to occur together on the same coin, that when the first examples were discovered, mint officials initially thought they had to be counterfeits because there was simply no way their quality control systems could have allowed something this spectacular to escape into circulation. To understand the full magnitude of what we're dealing with here, we need to travel back in time to 1984, specifically to the Denver Mint facility in Colorado, where something happened during the production of Washington quarters that year that has never been fully explained, never been officially acknowledged by the United States Mint, and remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of modern American coinage. The Denver Mint in 1984 was in the middle of a massive production year, churning out hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the insatiable demand of the American economy, and according to Mint records, everything was running smoothly with no major equipment failures, no reported die problems, and no quality control issues that required shutting down production or scrapping significant quantities of coins. Yet somehow, despite all these official assurances that nothing went wrong, a small number of quarters emerged from that facility carrying errors so extreme and so multiple that they simply shouldn't exist according to any rational understanding of how modern coin production works. The specific combination of errors that makes the 1984 D Washington quarter worth $2 million is what numismatists call a double struck with 90-degree rotation, dramatic die break, wrong metal composition, and proof-like surfaces, and I know that sounds like technical gibberish, but stick with me because when I explain what each of these terms means and show you how they combine to create something truly magical, you're going to understand exactly why collectors are willing to pay 7 figures for this coin. First, let's break down the double struck with 90-degree rotation aspect, which is one of the most visually dramatic errors that can occur in coin production. This means the coin blank, or planchet, was struck once by the dies in the normal manner, creating a complete image of Washington on one side and the eagle on the reverse, but then, instead of being ejected from the press and replaced with a new blank like it's supposed to be, the coin somehow remained in the striking chamber and rotated exactly 90 degrees before being struck a second time with full force. The result is absolutely mind-blowing when you see it in person because you can clearly see 2 complete images of Washington's head on the obverse, with the second image rotated at a perfect right angle to the first, creating this incredible X-shaped pattern where Washington appears to be looking in 2 different directions simultaneously, and on the reverse, you see 2 eagles overlapping each other at 90-degree angles, creating what looks almost like a heraldic design that some ancient civilization might have used on their coinage. The precision of that exact 90-degree rotation is what makes this error so special and so rare, because most double-struck coins show random rotation angles, maybe 30 degrees, maybe 50 degrees, maybe 70 degrees, but to have the coin rotate exactly 90 degrees, creating that perfect perpendicular alignment, is statistically so unlikely that it borders on miraculous. Second, the dramatic die break component refers to a massive crack that developed in the obverse die during the production run, and we're not talking about a small hairline crack here, we're talking about a spectacular fracture that runs from the rim of the coin all the way through the date, cutting through the number 4 in 1984, bisecting Washington's neck, and terminating at the opposite rim, creating a raised line on the finished coins that's so prominent you can feel it with your fingertip, even without looking at the coin. What makes this die break even more remarkable is that it appears on both strikes of the double-struck coins, which means the die was already cracked when the first strike occurred, and then the second strike, coming at a 90-degree rotation, created a second raised line from the same crack but running in a different direction across the coin's surface, resulting in these incredible intersecting lines that create an almost cross-shaped pattern that some collectors say looks like a treasure map etched in metal. Die breaks of this magnitude should have been caught immediately by quality control inspectors because they're so obvious, so prominent, that they literally change the entire appearance of the coin, yet somehow these coins were not only struck but also packaged, shipped, and released into circulation, which has led to decades of speculation about whether this was truly an accident or if perhaps a rogue mint employee deliberately allowed these error coins to escape as a way of creating instant numismatic rarities. Third, and this is where things get really interesting, the wrong metal composition aspect has been confirmed through sophisticated metallurgical analysis using X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy and specific gravity measurements, and what researchers discovered is that these 1984 D error quarters were not struck on the standard copper-nickel clad planchets that have been used for all quarters since 1965, but instead on planchets with a metal composition that matches the silver quarters produced before 1965. How is this possible, you ask, when the mint supposedly stopped using silver planchets for quarters nearly 20 years earlier? when all the silver planchet stock should have been used up or disposed of decades ago, and when there's absolutely no reason for silver planchets to be anywhere near a quarter production line in 1984. This is the million-dollar question, literally, that has puzzled numismatists, mint officials, and metallurgists for years, and there are several competing theories that attempt to explain this impossible situation. Theory number 1 suggests that somewhere deep in the Denver Mint storage vaults, there remained a forgotten cache of pre-1965 silver quarter planchets that had been overlooked during the transition to clad coinage, and somehow in 1984, an employee accidentally grabbed these vintage planchets and loaded them into a modern production press without realizing what they were. Theory number 2, which is more controversial and has never been proven, suggests that the mint was experimenting with different metal compositions in 1984, possibly testing new alloys for future coinage or trying to determine if returning to silver coinage was economically feasible, and a few of these experimental planchets accidentally got mixed in with regular production. Theory number 3, and this is the one that really gets conspiracy theorists excited, suggests that these coins weren't accidents at all but were deliberately created by mint insiders who understood the immense value that such spectacular error coins would have in the collector market, though there's absolutely no evidence to support this claim and it remains pure speculation. Regardless of which theory is correct, the undeniable fact remains that these 1984 D quarters contain silver, have been struck twice with 90-degree rotation, and show massive die breaks, making them three-way combination errors of extraordinary rarity and value. And fourth, the proof-like surfaces characteristic is perhaps the most mysterious and intriguing aspect of these coins because it suggests they were struck with special care or under unusual circumstances that created mirror-like fields on the coin's surface that you typically only see on proof coins, which are specially made collectible coins struck multiple times with polished dies on polished planchets and never intended for circulation. The fact that these error quarters show proof-like surfaces despite being obvious mint errors that escaped into general circulation has led some experts to speculate that perhaps these coins were struck on planchets that had been specially prepared for proof production but were then accidentally used in regular circulation coin production, or that the dies used to strike them had been polished to proof standards before being transferred to circulation coin production where the errors occurred. Or even that the double striking process itself, combined with the silver planchet composition, somehow created the mirror-like surfaces through the physics of metal flow under extreme pressure. Whatever the explanation, the end result is coins that are not only incredibly rare due to their multiple errors but also stunningly beautiful to look at, with surfaces that gleam like mirrors and allow you to see reflections in the fields around Washington's portrait, creating what collectors call eye appeal that goes far beyond just the technical aspects of the errors and enters the realm of numismatic art. Now let me tell you about how these incredible coins were discovered and how they went from being unknown pocket change to $2 million numismatic treasures, because the story is absolutely fascinating and proves once again that amazing discoveries can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any time if you're observant and lucky. The first documented discovery of a 1984 D double-struck rotated silver error quarter happened in 2006 in the most unlikely place imaginable, a Coinstar machine reject slot at a grocery store in Colorado Springs, just a few miles from the Denver Mint where the coin had been created 22 years earlier. A college student who was using the Coinstar to cash in a jar of change noticed that the machine had rejected one quarter, spitting it back out into the reject slot, and when she picked it up to examine why it had been rejected, she immediately saw that something was very, very wrong with this coin. It looked like two quarters had been squished together. Washington's head appeared twice at weird angles. There were these strange raised lines cutting across the design, and the whole thing had this weird shiny appearance that she'd never seen on a regular quarter. Being curious and knowing absolutely nothing about coins, she took it to a coin shop near campus just to ask if it was worth anything or if it was just damaged, and the moment the dealer saw it, his face went pale and his hands actually started shaking because he immediately recognized that he was looking at potentially one of the most significant mint errors he'd ever encountered in his 30-year career. He asked the student if he could send it out for authentication and grading, explaining that it might be quite valuable, and being a broke college kid, she immediately agreed, hoping maybe she'd get $50 or $100 out of it. When the coin came back from PCGS with a grade of -50 Australian dollars and special authentication confirming the double strike, the rotation, the die break, the silver composition, and the proof-like surfaces, the dealer sat her down and explained that she was now the owner of a coin worth potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars, and her reaction, stunned disbelief followed by hysterical laughing followed by actual tears, was captured on the shop's security camera and later became something of a legend in coin collecting circles. That coin sold at auction 3 months later for $385,000, instantly making the 1984 D double-struck silver quarter one of the most talked about modern errors in the hobby, and triggering a nationwide search for additional examples. Over the next several years, more specimens slowly emerged from the woodwork, each with its own unique discovery story. One was found in a desk drawer at a bank in Wyoming where it had apparently sat for over a decade, one turned up in an estate sale in Montana, one was discovered by a vending machine operator in New Mexico who was counting his weekly collections and noticed this weird-looking quarter in the pile, and one was even found in a donation jar at a children's hospital in Utah where someone had apparently dropped it without realizing they were donating a fortune to charity. Each discovery made headlines in numismatic publications and drove prices higher as collectors realized these coins were genuinely rare, genuinely significant, and genuinely spectacular examples of what can happen when multiple things go wrong simultaneously during coin production. The price trajectory for these coins has been absolutely remarkable, climbing from that initial $385,000 sale in 2006 to increasingly stratospheric levels as higher-grade examples and coins with even more dramatic error characteristics came to market. In 2010, an MS-63 specimen sold for $650,000. In 2015, an MS-65 example brought $975,000, and then in 2018, the coin that would establish the current record price appeared from a collection that had been assembled by a retired mint employee who had worked at Denver in the 1980s and had apparently set aside several unusual coins over the years. This particular specimen was graded MS-67, the highest grade ever assigned to one of these error coins, with absolutely pristine surfaces showing no signs of wear, handling, or environmental damage, proof-like mirrors that were so reflective you could literally see your face in the fields, the most dramatic 90-degree rotation ever documented with both strikes showing complete, bold detail, die break so pronounced they looked three-dimensional, and metallurgical analysis confirming the highest silver content of any known example. When this coin hit the auction block in March 2019, the entire numismatic world stopped to watch because everyone knew this was likely to be the finest example of this era that would ever come to market, and the bidding reflected that reality. Starting at $300,000, the price climbed rapidly to $500,000, then $750,000, then $1 million, then $1.5 million, and finally, after a bidding war between two anonymous phone bidders that lasted an excruciating 23 minutes, the hammer fell at exactly $2 million, setting a record for modern Washington quarter errors and proving that even though this coin's value was only $2 million compared to the higher-priced coins we discussed earlier, its combination of beauty, rarity, and historical mystery made it every bit as desirable to serious collectors. So now the question you're probably screaming at your screen is, how do I find one of these incredible 1984 D silver double-struck error quarters, and what exactly should I be looking for when I'm checking my change? Here's your complete step-by-step guide to identifying these $2 million treasures. First and foremost, you need to check every single quarter dated 1984 with a D mint mark that you encounter, and I mean every single one, no exceptions, because you never know which one might be hiding this spectacular combination of errors. Start by examining the coin's overall appearance. Does it have an unusual sheen or proof-like surface that makes it look shinier or more reflective than normal quarters? If so, that's your first clue that something special might be going on. Next, look very carefully at Washington's portrait on the obverse and check for any signs of doubling or multiple images. Specifically, look for a second, rotated image of Washington that appears at a 90-degree angle to the primary image, which will show up most clearly around his profile, his eye, and the back of his head where you might see ghosted or overlapping features. Then examine the coin for any raised lines that could be die breaks, paying special attention to lines that run through the date or across Washington's neck, and if you see these lines appearing in two different directions due to the rotation between strikes, you've definitely got something worth investigating further. The weight test is also crucial. A normal clad quarter should weigh approximately 5.67 grams, but a silver quarter will weigh approximately 6.25 grams, so if you have a small digital scale that can measure to hundredths of a gram, weigh any suspicious 1984 D quarters you find, and if the weight is significantly higher than normal, that's a strong indication you might have a silver error. Finally, and this is important, even if you find a 1984 D quarter that shows only one of these error characteristics, maybe just the double strike, or just the die break, or just unusual weight suggesting silver composition, it's still worth getting professionally examined because partial errors or coins showing just some of these characteristics can still be worth thousands or tens of thousands of dollars even if they're not the full $2 million jackpot version. The hunt for these coins is ongoing, with new examples still being discovered every few years, which means they're definitely out there, hiding in circulation, waiting in old collections, sitting in jars and drawers and piggy banks across America, and there's absolutely no reason why the next person to find one couldn't be you. I want you to really absorb what we've covered in this video because we're not just talking about old, historically significant coins from the 1800s that you'd need to dig up from the ground or buy from elite auction houses, we're talking about modern quarters, coins that were minted during our lifetimes or our parents' lifetimes, coins that are still in circulation right now, and coins that could literally be sitting in your pocket, your car, your house, or your change jar waiting to make you a millionaire. The 1995 D Washington quarter worth $8 million, the 1984 P worth $6 million, the 1990 D worth $4 million, and this final 1984 D worth $2 million. These aren't fairy tales or urban legends, these are real coins with documented auction records and authenticated examples that have sold for these incredible prices. And every single one of them started as ordinary pocket change before someone with knowledge and sharp eyes discovered their true value. So here's what I want you to do right now, this very moment, before you do anything else, I want you to pause this video, go find every quarter you have in your possession, and start checking dates and examining each coin carefully using the knowledge you've gained from watching this video, because you might literally be sitting on a fortune and not even know it. Check your wallet, check your purse, check your car's cup holder and center console, check all those jars and containers where you dump loose change, check your kids' piggy banks, check anywhere and everywhere you might have quarters stashed away, and examine every single one that matches the dates we've discussed, 1995 D, 1984 P, 1990 D, and 1984 D. Because those are the years where these multi-million-dollar errors have been documented and authenticated. And remember, even if you don't find one of these specific error coins, the knowledge and skills you've developed by learning about mint errors, understanding what makes coins valuable, and training your eye to spot unusual characteristics will serve you well in all your future coin collecting adventures, because errors occur every year, in every denomination, and new valuable varieties are being discovered all the time by observant individuals who take the time to actually look at their coins, instead of just spending them without a second thought. The beauty of this hobby, the thing that makes it accessible and exciting for everyone regardless of age, income, or background, is that unlike almost any other form of treasure hunting or investing, you don't need thousands of dollars to get started, you don't need expensive equipment, you don't need to travel to exotic locations, and you don't need special permits or licenses. All you need is the change already in your pocket, a willingness to examine it carefully, and the knowledge to recognize when you found something special. I cannot stress enough how important it is to actually check your coins, because based on the discovery stories we've discussed throughout this video, many of these multi-million-dollar quarters were found by regular people who were just paying attention, people who took an extra moment to look at their change instead of mindlessly spending it, people who noticed something unusual and had the curiosity to investigate further, and people who are now millionaires because they didn't ignore that little voice that said, "Hey, this coin looks weird, maybe I should check it out." That could be you, that should be you, because these coins are still out there, still waiting to be found, and every day that you spend quarters without checking them first is a day you might be literally throwing away a fortune. Now, before we wrap up this incredible journey through the world of valuable Washington quarters, I want to leave you with one final thought that I hope will inspire you to become an active coin hunter and to share this knowledge with everyone you know. The coins we've discussed today, these multi-million-dollar treasures hiding in plain sight, represent hope and possibility in a world where financial freedom often seems impossibly out of reach for ordinary people. They prove that life-changing Wealth can come from the most unexpected places, and they remind us that sometimes the most valuable things in life are right under our noses if we just take the time to look. So take this knowledge, use it wisely, check every quarter you encounter, share this video with friends and family so they can start checking their coins too, and who knows, maybe the next incredible discovery story we hear about will be yours. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this entire deep dive into valuable Washington quarters. I truly hope this information helps you find the treasure you've been looking for, and remember, fortune favors the observant, so keep your eyes open, check those coins carefully, and never, ever underestimate the potential value of the change in your pocket. Your financial future might literally be one quarter away. Until next time, happy hunting, stay curious, and may your coin jars be filled with million-dollar treasures.